Hello, I'm Dr. Cécile Cosculuela. Welcome to this ESL video on English grammar. We're still working on the passive voice, and this time we are going to have a look at specific characteristics of the English passive. So in Jean-Pierre Gabilon's grammar book, there are some really interesting remarks that I would like to share with you. So, quelqu'un a craché sur moi. We might go from this active voice sentence to je me suis fait cracher dessus, which might be regarded as having a more passive meaning. And but it's not really a passive voice sentence anyway. And in English, someone spat on me has a direct corresponding passive sentence because you can very well say, I was spat on, I was spat upon. So anytime, yes, let's look at more examples before we draw a conclusion. On a tiré sur moi. I can go from this French sentence to je me suis fait tirer dessus, which again is not a passive voice sentence either, but sorry. And in English, someone shot at me is the active voice sentence, and there is the possibility of switching to a passive voice sentence, I was shot at. And again, we can see that it is really, really important to put the preposition again at the end of the passive voice sentence. So it's the same thing here. Someone spat on me, and the preposition needs to be used at the end of the passive voice sentence, which is not possible in French. Quelqu'un est rentré dans sa voiture. So from this active voice sentence, I can switch to il s'est fait rentrer dedans, which is very colloquial and not a passive voice sentence, even though the meaning might be similar to that of a passive voice sentence. But in English, someone crashed into his car can very well be turned into a passive voice sentence. His car was crashed into, and again, I make sure I pay attention to the fact that there is a preposition in the active voice sentence that I need to use again in the passive voice sentence. And this symbol here means that this sentence is not grammatically correct. On a bu dans mon verre. Est-ce que je peux dire, can I say, mon verre a été bu dedans? Well, that doesn't even work in French. Whereas in English, my glass has been drunk out of is absolutely correct. And again, make sure you use the preposition at the end of the passive voice sentence. On a marché sur le gazon. Le gazon a été marché dessus is really not an option in French, so you remember the asterisk here means that these sentences are not grammatically correct. And in English, the lawn has been trodden on is completely possible. Just make sure that you use the preposition at the end of the passive voice sentence that is used to translate on, because in both cases it refers to something that is vague and not identified. Okay, so all these interesting remarks are in the Grammaire expliquée de l'anglais, mainly page 183. Let's go on to translating this French sentence into English. Cette photographie a été prise par mon frère. Par mon frère is the agent, le complément d'agent. and it's introduced by par in French, and in English, the photograph was taken by my brother. So by my brother is the agent, and it's introduced by, and by is the most common preposition that is used to introduce agents, but it's not necessarily the only one. So, for instance, in le stade était plein à craquer de supporters de Leeds, the preposition cannot be by, it has to be with. The stadium was packed with Leeds supporters. So you need to make sure, you need to check what preposition works with the verb you're using. On page 176, an interesting remark as regards by. So when I say beer is sold by the pint and petrol used to be sold by the gallon, is that the same by as the one that we had here to introduce the agent? Not at all. This is just an adverbial phrase that is introduced here. So just some specificity that we're mentioning, but it is not at all the agent. Okay, so some sniper shot at me. Is this an active or a passive sentence? That's an active sentence. Can I turn it into a passive voice sentence? Well, yes, I was shot. I was shot at, sorry. I was shot at. And again, I make sure anytime there's a preposition in the active voice sentence that I use that preposition again in the passive voice sentence. And then I can add the agent or not by some sniper. What would the French be for that passive voice sentence? On m'a tiré dessus. Quelqu'un m'a tiré dessus. So these two options are possible. Nobody has slept in our bed. Active or passive voice sentence? Active. What's the passive voice that we can create starting from that active voice sentence? Well, again, our bed, the subject of the passive voice sentence, has not been slept in. That's the main difficulty here, really. I need to notice that this is a prepositional verb, and the preposition is absolutely necessary at the end of the passive clause. Clause, la proposition. Nobody has eaten from these plates. An active voice sentence again that I want to turn into a passive voice sentence. And what do I notice? That it's eating from something. So there's a preposition, and I know it's difficult, but I need to remember to use the preposition in the passive voice sentence, which would be these plates have not been eaten from. And the French translation, on n'a pas mangé dans ces assiettes, personne n'a mangé dans ces assiettes. So the main thing here to remember is that it's really important to use the preposition, as you can see here, when you create a passive voice sentence that has a prepositional verb. Okay, so that's all in the grammaire expliquée de l'anglais again. Yes, you can have a look at all these examples and also use other sources like internet websites. And let's go on to this little exercise here in which we need to find the difference between the cases in which the preposition used is the preposition by and those cases here in which there is a different preposition. So let's have a quick look at these examples. He's interested in math. He was interested by the story. He's frightened of the dark. He was frightened by a mouse. He's scared of snakes. He was scared off by the noise. So what's the difference between the cases in which we use the preposition by and the cases in which we use another preposition? Well, whenever we're not using the preposition by, it is because the sentences have a more general or generic value. Whereas when the preposition by is used, the meaning is more specific. Okay, so generic and specific, general and particular. If it's clearer, same kind of meaning for you to remember the difference between these two kinds of cases. Let's go on to the next two sentences, which both have the segment was broken. Is it the same segment? Does it have the same meaning? Let's have a look at the sentences. I looked at the branch and I realized that it was broken. There was a storm and the branch was broken by the wind. So you can tell when you read the sentences and therefore have more context to understand the meaning of was broken, that even though it's the same words, they do not have the same value, the same meaning. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is the fact that in the first case here, broken is a past participle that has the value of an adjective. Therefore, it is not a real passive voice. It is a state passive voice. And in the second case, when you say the branch was broken, you can tell, and that's interesting because it is a real passive voice because it really expresses an action. The past participle here, broken, really has a verb value and expresses an action. So it's a real passive voice. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so make sure you make the difference between the two, especially because it's a different meaning that's being expressed, and also sometimes the past participle has a different form depending on whether it has the value of an adjective or of a verb. So for instance, here, il fut rasé. Et il avait la tête rasée. Well, you can easily see that the first one expresses an action, whereas the second one expresses the result of that action like an adjective would. And so these two sentences will be translated by past participles that have different forms. And you would say he was shaved by the barber and his head was shaven. So some verbs do have a different form for the past participle depending on whether it has the value of a verb and expresses an action, or it has the value of an adjective and expresses a state, the result of an action. The next point, il est très fatigué, il est très satisfait, il est très apprécié par ses voisins ou de ses voisins. How are we going to translate those intensifiers? Are we going to say he's very tired, he's much tired, he's very much tired? Are we going to say he's very appreciated by his neighbors? He's much appreciated. He's very much appreciated. So in the first case, the past participle has the value of an adjective. So you would say he is very happy. Therefore, you would also say he's very tired or very pleased. Because it's the value, the past participle has the value of an adjective. Whereas here, he's much appreciated. And then, of course, you can intensify much with very. So he's much appreciated, he's very much appreciated by his neighbors. Is much is the intensifier that is used as soon as the past participle has the value of a verb more than that of an adjective. Nous avons été bloqués dans un embouteillage. So we could translate this sentence by we were stuck in a traffic jam, and there would be a difference in meaning if we compare that sentence to we got stuck in a traffic jam. If you say we were stuck, you're expressing a state with be, whereas we got stuck, you're expressing the fact that there is a change in that state. Okay, so both be and get can be used with the past participle, and that still is a passive voice. And the passive voice with be expresses a state, and with get expresses a changing state, a change in state. Il a fini par se faire élire. In the end, he was elected. Will not mean exactly the same as in the end he got elected, which highlights the change in the state. You know, before he was not elected and then he was elected. So be and get can both be used with the past participle to form the passive voice, and get always is associated with the idea that there is a change of state. Okay, so we have seen quite a number of different points here, and next time we'll work on more difficult things like prepositional verbs. We have touched upon that matter, but there are more things to be said, and we need more practice also, so we'll get back to that in the next video. Thank you for your attention. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, I wish you all the best.